Tonight, we begin with a softer question than it first appears. Not who we are or what we want, but what it means for something to last in a world where almost everything disappears. Outside your window, the night is patient. It does not hurry the wind or persuade the clouds. It simply holds them and lets time do its work. Life, in its deepest sense, is also a kind of patience. Across the world's long history, life forms have changed endlessly. Fins to feet, scales to feathers, firelight to streetlight. Yet something has continued moving forward, quietly, without ever knowing it was moving. It helps to imagine that the main character of evolution is not the animal you can see. It is the pattern you cannot. Long ago, before eyes or bones, there were arrangements of matter that could make copies of themselves. They were not alive in the way we mean it now. They had no plans, no feelings, no sense of survival. And still, the ones that copied successfully became more common, simply because time kept giving them chances to repeat. Once copying begins, the world starts keeping memory. Copies are never perfect, and small differences slip in, like tiny spelling changes in a long text. Most changes go nowhere, but some make copying a little easier, or make the pattern a little steadier, and those small advantages quietly accumulate, the way a trail becomes visible only after many feet have walked it. From that simple rule, copying with variation, everything else can unfold. And as the copies become more complex, they begin to wrap themselves in protection. They gather helpers around them. They build containers and engines and sensors and eventually whole bodies that can move through the world, eat, avoid danger, and reproduce. Bodies are vivid and immediate. They breathe, hunger, love, struggle, rest, but bodies do not last. The instructions do. They can outlive any single creature by thousands of generations, passing through family lines like a low, steady current. So tonight, we'll look at life from the point of view of what gets copied, not because it is colder, but because it is strangely calming, like stepping back from a noisy street into a quiet side alley where you can finally hear your own footsteps. And as you settle into your pillow, let the thought arrive gently. You are not only a person living one life, you are also a brief shelter for something far older, a continuation written in a language of molecules, still traveling, still repeating, still finding its way into tomorrow. For now, you don't need to hold anything tightly. Just listen, and let the night carry the ideas the way it carries the distant sound of rain. If we follow the thread backward, past memory and language, we arrive at something very small. A molecule does not look like destiny. It looks like chemistry. Bonds and angles, tiny shapes turning in dark water, and yet, when a pattern can copy itself, chemistry becomes history. The earliest replicators, whatever they were, did not need to be perfect. They only needed to copy more often than they broke apart. In a world of countless attempts, even a small edge becomes enormous. One extra copy in 1,000 becomes a lineage. One slight improvement in stability becomes an entire future. Over time, copying patterns learned a new trick. They began to gang together, not out of friendship, but because cooperation could protect the fragile message. Instead of drifting alone, they formed teams. Instead of being exposed to the open sea, they hid inside shelters, cells, where the environment could be managed and repairs could be made. Gradually, the modern genetic system emerged. DNA is not magic, but it is remarkably good at storing instructions. It can be copied with high fidelity, and it can also tolerate small changes that become the raw material of evolution. Yet DNA on its own is still vulnerable. Sunlight can break it, chemicals can distort it, heat can unravel it. So the message needs a vehicle. A body becomes that vehicle, a moving, breathing shelter built to keep the instructions safe long enough to make new copies. From this view, an organism is a temporary home. It is a survival machine made from wood and water and salt, assembled for a few decades, sometimes only for a few hours, and then returned to the larger world. The instructions continue. They are folded into eggs and seeds, carried in pollen and spores, passed along in the quiet handoff from parent to child. Tonight, it may feel strange to call life a machine, but notice how gentle the idea becomes when you slow it down. A machine can be warm. A machine can be beautiful. A machine can be the way the universe learns to make a pattern that lasts. And in that sense, each living body is less like a cold device and more like a lantern. It glows for a while, protecting a flame, and then it passes the flame forward. When you look at life this way, the drama changes shape. The important contest is not between species, and not even always between individuals. It is between alternative instructions, competing quietly through the bodies that carry them. Some instructions build a vehicle that resists disease. Some build a vehicle that sees a little better at dusk. Some build a vehicle that can endure winter or cooperate or wait. And over a long time, those instructions become more common simply because their vehicles tend to leave more copies behind. Once you accept that instructions can be the lasting thing, a new kind of self appears. Not the self you feel in your chest, but a quieter self, made of copying. A gene in this story is any stretch of DNA that is copied and passed on. It may be small, it may be large, and it is rarely alone. Genes travel in groups, sharing the same vehicle, sharing the same fate for a while, but across generations, the group is reshuffled. Partners change. New combinations appear. So the safest way to think of a gene is as a traveler that must do well in many different crowds. This is where the word selfish enters the conversation. It does not mean cruel. It does not mean conscious. It simply means that, in the long accounting of evolution, what matters is whether a gene leaves copies of itself. A gene can succeed even if the organism does not understand why it is behaving the way it does. A desire can feel personal while also being an ancient strategy. A fear can feel immediate while also being a protective pattern refined over countless nights. From the inside, we call these things feelings. From the outside, they can be described as tendencies that, on average, help vehicles survive and reproduce. And because genes share vehicles, most of the time their interests align. A gene that helps build a healthy heart usually helps itself because it is riding in the same body as the other genes that benefit. So cooperation within the body becomes the default, not because nature is kind, but because broken vehicles do not travel far. Yet the gene's eye view gives us a calm discipline. When you see a behavior, you can ask softly, what kind of copying advantage might lie beneath it? Not as a judgment, as a way of noticing how deep time has shaped even the smallest parts of ordinary life. Tonight, we will follow that question through tenderness and rivalry, family and friendship, trust and suspicion. And we'll keep returning to the same quiet fact. Genes do not need to want anything. They only need to be copied. Time does the rest. Sometimes the gene's best path looks like cooperation. Sometimes it looks like restraint. Sometimes it looks like a limited kind of generosity, offered in just the right places, where the return is reliable. So the word selfish is not a verdict on nature. It is a reminder that the logic of selection sits below morality, like bedrock below soil. You can build compassion on top of it, but the bedrock itself is simply there. And when you hold this gently, it becomes less frightening. It becomes a way of understanding why life can be both fierce and tender, often in the same breath. At first, the gene's eye view seems to predict a hard world. If what matters is copying, why would any creature ever help another? Why would a bird call out to warn the flock, drawing attention to itself? Why would an animal share food, groom a companion, or stand guard while others sleep? These acts can look selfless, and in everyday language, they often are. But evolution does not reward appearances. It rewards outcomes measured in survival and reproduction. So the question becomes quieter and more precise. Under what conditions can helping behavior still lead to more copies of the underlying instructions? The simplest answer is family. Genes are not unique to one body. They exist in scattered copies across relatives, overlapping like pages from the same book. A parent and child share a large portion. Siblings share on average about half. Cousins share less, yet still share. So a gene can, in a sense, help itself by helping copies of itself in other bodies. If a sacrifice is small and the benefit to a close relative is large, the gene may still increase in the next generation because it is present in both bodies. This can shape parental care sibling tolerance, and the fierce protectiveness seen in many animals. It can also shape the strange societies of insects, where workers may never reproduce at all, yet still devote their lives to a queen who carries much of the same genetic material. None of this requires calculation in the mind. The creature does not need to know the math. Natural selection can build feelings, attachment, loyalty, alarm, that reliably guide behavior in the right direction most of the time. So, the warm, familiar shape of family love can have a deep logic beneath it, not reducing it, but rooting it in a long history of what tended to endure. As you listen, notice how this changes the meaning of help. Sometimes helping another is also helping a shared lineage. It is a continuation taking care of itself through multiple bodies, through one winter, through one more night. Of course, the world is not made of perfect family trees. Recognition can be imperfect. Many animals use simple cues. Who is in the nest? Who smells familiar? Who has been close since birth? These are rough rules, but rough rules can be enough to shape a species over time. And even within families, interests do not align perfectly. The overlap is large, but not complete. So care can be real and conflict can be real, and both can come from the same deep source, the quiet pressure of what is passed on. Tonight, we'll keep walking gently along that edge. When you look closely at a nest, you can see both tenderness and tension. A parent brings food again and again until the day ends. The chicks stretch their necks, open their mouths, and call with urgency that feels almost desperate. From the outside, it can look like pure need. From the gene's eye view, it can also look like negotiation. A parent carries a set of instructions spread across all of its offspring and across potential future offspring. Its resources are limited: time, energy, safety, food. So there is often an optimal level of investment, enough to raise the current young successfully, but not so much that the parent cannot survive to reproduce again. A chick, however, is not responsible for the whole family tree. It is one small vehicle holding its own set of genes, overlapping with siblings, but not identical. From the chick's perspective, one extra mouthful can mean the difference between living and not living. So the chick's interests can lean toward demanding more for longer. This is why we see begging calls and jostling, even among close kin. It is not hatred. It is the quiet fact that siblings share many genes, but not all. Helping a sibling is not the same as helping yourself. Over time, selection can shape both sides of this conversation. Offspring evolve signals that persuade parents to give. Parents evolve sensitivity, but also resistance, so they are not endlessly manipulated. The result is a balance, held in place by costs and benefits, by the limits of bodies. In mammals, the same story can stretch for months. A mother gradually reduces nursing. The young protests. The mother turns away more often, not because love has vanished, but because another pregnancy, another winter, another set of young may also be part of the continuing line. Even in humans, echoes remain. We feel the pull between giving and conserving, between caring for one child and caring for the family, between present needs and future stability. Tonight, you do not need to judge any of it. You can simply notice how the living world holds both things at once: devotion and friction, warmth and limits. It was not triumph or failure, but endurance, a way of carrying the thread forward, one imperfect family at a time. Even the number of offspring can be shaped by this. Too few, and a lineage may fade by chance. Too many, and none receive enough care, and the whole effort collapses. So life often settles into a middle path, different for each species and each environment, tuned slowly by what tended to work. In this way, the ordinary scene of a parent feeding the young becomes more than a moment. It becomes a quiet expression of deep time, playing out in small motions under the same dimming sky. Another quiet place where interests diverge is in mating and parenting. In many species, the cost of making an egg, carrying it, protecting it, and feeding the young is heavy. The cost of making sperm is often lighter, produced in vast numbers, scattered like pollen. From this imbalance, different pressures can arise. When one side invests more in each offspring, it tends to be choosier. When one side can potentially create many offspring with little initial cost, it often competes more for access. Out of these pressures come displays, bright feathers, complex songs, careful dances. They are not vanity. They are signals, ways of saying without words, that the body carrying these genes has survived long enough and remained healthy enough to afford such extravagance. Some signals are honest because they are hard to fake. A heavy tail that makes flight harder, a loud call that attracts predators, a bright color that stands out. These can be costly, and cost itself can become proof. If you can survive while carrying the burden, the message is clear. Choice and competition across many generations can shape not only beauty, but behavior. Guarding and jealousy can arise where certainty of parenthood matters. Long bonds can arise where offspring require long care. Quick partnerships can arise where care is minimal and opportunity is fleeting. None of this is destiny for any single creature. It is simply the set of tendencies that, on average, made more copies in particular conditions. And conditions change. So, within a species, there can be multiple strategies, different routes through the same landscape. Some individuals invest heavily in parenting. Some invest heavily in seeking mates. Some shift with age, health, season, and chance. From the inside, it can feel like personality. From the gene's eye view, it can also be seen as variation, tested softly by time. As the world slows tonight, let this feel less like a verdict and more like weather. Attraction and rivalry, bonding and wandering are part of the long story of how life continues. And still, beneath all the complexity, the quiet rule remains the same. What is copied tends to persist. Sometimes even the balance of males and females in a population can be shaped by this logic. If one sex becomes rare, producing more of that sex can increase a parent's genetic success, and the ratio drifts back toward balance. So the living world often finds equilibrium, not by design, but by feedback. And when you hold these ideas gently, they become less about explaining romance and more about explaining the quiet forces that sculpt patterns of care and desire again and again across the darkened earth. When resources are limited, conflict becomes a kind of arithmetic, a food patch, a nesting hole, a territory with shade and water. These things can determine who survives long enough to reproduce. So evolution can shape strategies for contest. Some strategies are bold and escalating. Some are cautious and withdrawing. Some begin with display, saving true fighting for rare moments because injury is expensive and a wounded body is a poor vehicle. Imagine two animals meeting at the edge of a resource. If both always fight, both pay high costs. If both always retreat, neither gains much. But if one tends to threaten while the other tends to yield, the threatening strategy spreads until there are too many threats and the costs rise again. This is one reason behaviors can settle into stable mixtures. A population may contain both fighters and avoiders, or behaviors that switch depending on context. The best strategy is not always the harshest. It is the one that does well against the strategies that are common around it. So, the environment for behavior is not only weather and food. It is other behavior. And because the environment shifts as strategies spread, selection can move toward balance points where no simple alternative can easily invade. These are steady places in the landscape of evolution, reached without intention, the way a marble rolls into a shallow bowl. In human terms, this can sound like cynicism, but in the night, you can hold it as a quiet description of why nature is rarely uniform, why boldness and caution both exist, why peace and aggression both exist, why the world contains a range of temperaments, not just one ideal. Even within you, you can feel such mixtures. Sometimes you protect, sometimes you yield. Sometimes you speak, sometimes you wait. These are not flaws. They are the many shapes that survival has taken, refined, and re-refined across generations that never knew your name. And tonight, you can simply rest inside that wide, varied inheritance. Often, the most common fight in nature is not a fight at all. It is a display, a raised crest, a widened stance, a call across distance, a circling dance. These rituals allow conflict to be decided with fewer injuries, and because injuries reduce future copying, rituals can be favored. So even confrontation can evolve toward restraint. And many strategies are conditional. A small animal may bluff against an even smaller one, but retreat from a larger one. A bird may defend fiercely during nesting season and share space peacefully at other times. The details differ, but the pattern repeats. Behavior shaped by payoffs, tuned by others. In the gene's eye view, this is not a story about cruelty. It is a story about limited resources and costly mistakes and the slow discovery of what can persist without breaking the vehicle that carries it. Family is one route to helping, but there is another route that appears when life is repeated and memory exists. Two individuals who are not close kin may still cooperate if they are likely to meet again. In that case, what you do today shapes what happens to you tomorrow. A bat that shares blood with another bat that failed to feed may receive the same help on a future night. A bird that cleans parasites from a neighbor's feathers may later be cleaned in return. In such relationships, generosity is not pure self-sacrifice. It is an investment in a future where partners remain alive and willing. To make this work, a few things are needed. There must be repeated interaction. There must be some way of recognizing who helped and who cheated, even if the recognition is simple. And there must be consequences for taking without giving. When those conditions hold, selection can favor strategies that begin with cooperation. They help first, as if extending a hand, but they also carry a memory. If help is returned, the cooperation continues. If help is exploited, the help is withdrawn. Over time, such strategies can create stable pockets of trust, even in a world where short-term temptation exists. The classic thought experiment here is the prisoner's dilemma, where immediate gain pulls against long-term mutual benefit. If both sides cooperate, both do well. If one defects while the other cooperates, the defector gains. But if defection spreads, the system becomes harsh, and everyone loses opportunities that cooperation could have offered. Nature does not solve this with speeches. It solves it by selection, slowly favoring patterns that work in a repeated world. So the calm truth is this: kindness can persist when it is paired with memory and boundaries. Not endless giving, not endless taking, but something balanced, cooperative, yet not defenseless. As you drift, let that balance feel familiar. It is the same rhythm found in friendships that last, in partnerships built on trust, in communities where reputations matter. Life repeats, and in repetition, cooperation can become one of the ways the world stays livable. In many small societies, the rule is quiet and simple. Help those who help you. Avoid those who do not. And if someone returns to cooperation, allow the relationship to heal. This last part, forgiveness, matters more than it seems, because mistakes happen, and a strategy that punishes forever can lose good partners for accidental slips. So the most durable patterns are often calm in tone, nice but provocable, firm but not rigid. They allow both sides to win again and again in a game that does not require a single victor. In the long run, survival is not only about defeating others. It can also be about finding ways to keep sharing a world. Wherever cooperation exists, the possibility of cheating appears like a shadow. A creature that takes help without paying the cost can gain in the short term. So selection often favors not only cooperation, but also detection. The living world becomes full of small tests. A bird that offers grooming watches for return. A fish that removes parasites from a larger fish keeps an eye on sudden movement, ready to dart away if the host decides to eat the cleaner. Even among primates, alliances and favors can be tracked, sometimes with surprising nuance. In humans, this tracking becomes deeply emotional. We feel gratitude when helped and resentment when exploited. We feel guilt when we take too much and pride when we keep a promise. These feelings can be seen as inner tools that support long-term cooperation. They make certain behaviors easier and certain betrayals harder, not because the universe demands it, but because stable relationships tended to keep vehicles safer. The same logic can shape anger. Anger is not only noise. It can be a signal, a boundary drawn in the air, telling others that exploitation has a cost. And reconciliation can be shaped as well. A handshake, an apology, a gift. These can restore trust, allowing cooperation to continue rather than collapsing into endless conflict. But not all strategies are gentle. Some rely on deception, appearing cooperative while taking what they can. So, selection can favor skepticism, a careful eye, the habit of watching what others do rather than what they say. This does not mean life is cynical. It means life is layered. Trust exists, and so does the temptation to break it. So the world grows minds that can remember, compare, and respond. As you relax, notice how soothing it can be to see emotions as part of nature's toolkit, not excuses, not commandments, but ancient instruments. They helped small groups endure. They helped cooperation survive the presence of cheats. And in your own life, you can feel them as weather in the chest, passing through, rising, and falling. Tonight, you do not need to follow any emotion to its conclusion. You can simply let it be what it is, a signal from deep time, and then let it fade, the way a sound fades when the night grows quiet again. There is also cooperation that spreads through reputation. You may help someone not because they can repay you directly, but because others remember, and a good name becomes a kind of shelter in a social world. In humans, language magnifies this, and stories about generosity or betrayal can travel farther than any single act. Tonight, you don't need to carry that weight. The night is not asking you to perform, only to rest. So far, our story has stayed close to bodies. We have watched how copying can shape care, conflict, mating, friendship, and trust. And now the night invites one more widening, because in one lineage the vehicle grew a new ability to model the world, to imagine the future, to learn quickly from others. A brain became not only a tool for survival, but a place where patterns could be stored and shared. With learning, a new kind of speed entered the story. A gene changes by mutation and selection across generations. A learned behavior can change within a single lifetime. And when learning becomes social, when one mind can pass a pattern to another, the pace quickens again. A child watches an adult and copies. A group repeats a ritual until it feels natural. A tool design spreads, a story spreads, a rule spreads. None of this requires reproduction in the biological sense. It requires attention and imitation. So the forces of selection begin to operate in a second medium, not only in DNA, but in ideas. This matters because the two streams can interact. Biology shapes the capacity for language, for memory, for imitation. Culture shapes behavior, which shapes survival, which shapes which genes are carried forward. The braid becomes complex, and yet the underlying logic remains calm. Patterns that replicate tend to spread. Patterns that fade tend to disappear. Tonight, we'll step gently into this second evolution. The mind becomes another kind of habitat, and ideas, like seeds on the wind, begin to find new places to grow. You can see hints of this in other animals. Some birds learn songs from one another, and a small mistake becomes a new variation. A note is doubled, a rhythm shifts, and a different song takes hold in a valley, passed down not through eggs, but through listening. But in humans, this process becomes a world. We invent words, write them down, and carry them across time so an idea can outlive a single voice. This is not separate from biology. It is built on biology, like a second floor, built on an old foundation. And it means that some forces shaping your life will be cultural, not genetic. For now, let this feel like a slow door opening. The room beyond is not bright. It is still night, only wider. In that wider night, ideas can compete gently for attention. Some are easy to remember and get repeated. Some are complicated and fall away. And because copying is imperfect, the repeated idea changes just a little as it travels, becoming new versions the way a path becomes new shapes after rain. You don't have to follow every step. Just feel the shift. Evolution has found a second channel, and we are drifting into it. In this second channel of evolution, the basic unit is not a gene. It is a small pattern of culture that can be copied. A tune, a phrase, a recipe, a style of dress, a belief, a gesture, a way of seeing the world. These patterns spread when one person imitates another, when a mind repeats what it has received. They can be carried by voices, by books, by images, by the quiet habits of a household. They can be taught intentionally or absorbed without noticing. Some spread because they solve a problem. Some spread because they feel comforting. Some spread because they are funny or simple or sharp-edged, or because they promise certainty in a confusing world. To name these cultural replicators, a word was coined: meme. Like a gene, a meme can have descendants. It can persist for years, centuries, sometimes longer, living in many minds across generations. And like a gene, it can change as it spreads. A story is retold and a detail shifts. A proverb is shortened. A ritual adapts to a new place. This is cultural mutation happening quietly every day. The environment for a meme is not soil or sunlight. It is other ideas already living in a mind and the social world around that mind. Some memes help one another, forming clusters that reinforce themselves. A story creates a rule. The rule creates identity. Identity protects the story. In that way, a whole system of beliefs can become harder to disturb than any one belief alone. But not all memes are gentle. Some spread because they hook into fear. Some spread because they divide the world into simple sides, offering belonging at the cost of complexity. Some spread because they discourage questioning, protecting themselves by making doubt feel dangerous. None of this means culture is bad. It means culture is alive with selection, just as biology is. And tonight, you can hold this idea with softness. Your mind is not only a place where thoughts appear, it is also a place where inherited patterns arrive, linger, transform, and sometimes move on. You are a host, briefly, for countless memes, and you can choose more often than you think which ones you will keep. The speed is different here. Genes take generations to spread. Memes can spread in minutes. And because of this, the two systems can sometimes pull in different directions. A meme can thrive even if it costs the body, because memes do not have to serve genes. They only have to be repeated. Tonight, you don't need to decide what to believe. You can simply notice the currents and let the night be quiet enough to sense what is borrowed, what is chosen, and what is ready to fade. In daylight, we often assume ideas spread because they are true. But in the mimetic world, truth is only one advantage among many. A meme can spread because it is simple, because it is emotional, because it offers a clear enemy or a clear promise or a clear identity. It can spread because it is rhythmic, because it fits into a short phrase, because it can be worn on a shirt or repeated in a song. In this sense, minds can be influenced the way bodies can be infected. A catchy tune enters you without permission. A slogan takes root and repeats itself in your thoughts. A rumor moves through a group, changing shape with each retelling, gaining drama, losing nuance, becoming more suited to travel. And yet, the mimetic world is not only manipulation. It includes art, science, humor, and tenderness. Some memes spread because they enlarge us. They teach patience. They teach compassion. They teach the habit of asking gently, how do we know? This habit is important because minds can develop defenses. Skepticism, curiosity, education, and the practice of checking evidence can act like an immune system, making certain ideas struggle to survive. Even these defenses can be taught. A child can inherit not only a belief, but a way of testing beliefs. So memes compete not only with other memes, but with the mental environments they encounter. In one culture, a superstition may thrive. In another, it may be laughed away. In one mind, a harsh idea may feel comforting. In another, it may feel foreign and impossible to hold. And because the copying of memes is rarely perfect, they blend. A belief mixes with another belief. A tradition absorbs a modern explanation. A story takes on new characters, new settings, a new ending. From afar, it can look chaotic. From the inside, it can feel like the living drift of culture, always changing, always reweaving itself. Tonight, you can let your own thoughts be gentle territory. You don't need to fight every idea. You can simply notice it, and if it does not serve your rest, you can let it pass. Like a leaf on dark water, carried onward without your effort. Memes can also cooperate. A set of ideas that reinforce one another can form a stable bundle, like threads twisted into a rope, and small ideas often travel easiest. A short, snappy phrase is easier to repeat than a long, careful one, so culture can favor slogans over essays. Still, there is something tender here. When a life ends, what remains is not only children, but influence, skills taught, comforts offered, stories passed on. In that way, culture extends the reach of a life beyond the body. With both genes and memes in the picture, the question of cooperation becomes even richer. In a purely genetic world, cooperation can be favored when it helps relatives or when partners meet again. In a cultural world, cooperation can also be taught. A society can repeat rules until they feel like instinct. It can praise certain behaviors, shame others, reward honesty, punish theft, and build institutions that make trust easier. These cultural patterns can become stable in the same way biological strategies can. They persist because they work, because they reduce costly conflict, because they allow groups to endure through scarcity and stress. And yet, the presence of culture does not erase the older forces. Our bodies still carry impulses shaped in small groups, sensitivity to fairness, attention to status, fear of exclusion, longing for belonging. Culture can amplify these impulses or soften them or redirect them. A meme can teach generosity. A meme can also teach division. So the human story becomes a negotiation between what we inherited and what we repeat. This negotiation can be seen in the way we handle cheaters. In nature, a cheat may be avoided or punished through simple memory. In human life, we can build law. We can create records, contracts, courts, reputations that reach beyond a single village. We can protect cooperation with systems rather than only with emotion. And we can choose to forgive. Forgiveness is not weakness here. It is a strategy that allows repair after mistakes, keeping relationships from collapsing after one slip and allowing trust to be rebuilt. But forgiveness also has limits because repeated exploitation is costly. So stable societies often develop balanced patterns: kindness paired with boundaries, openness paired with verification, generosity paired with accountability. As you drift, let this feel like the quiet architecture of the human world. Invisible scaffolding built by repeated choices, helping life feel safer than it otherwise would. Nothing about this needs to be perfected tonight. You only need to sense that cooperation can be both natural and learned, both ancient and newly invented, and that in the long run, the world can become gentler when stable patterns support it. And because cultural patterns spread by imitation, they are also tested. A norm that makes a group resilient can spread as others copy it. A norm that destroys trust can collapse a community and be abandoned. Culture can explore many arrangements quickly, keeping what works and letting the rest fade. Tonight, let that speed feel quiet rather than frantic. It means we are not trapped inside our oldest impulses. We can learn, adjust, and choose new patterns softly over time. Now we widen again, beyond mind, beyond skin, into the way bodies change the world around them. A phenotype is the visible expression of genetic instructions: eyes, bones, metabolism, reflex. But some expressions do not stop at the edge of the body. They spill outward into structures and traces, into altered landscapes that make survival more likely. A beaver's dam is one of the clearest examples. The wood and water are not part of the beaver's flesh, and yet the dam is built by a set of behaviors shaped by inheritance. The dam creates calmer water, safer shelter, and a place where young can grow. So, in a meaningful sense, the dam is part of the beaver's expression. A spider's web is similar. A bird's nest, a termite mound. A burrow in sand that stays cool through the day. Even a carefully chosen stone carried to build a protective case under a lake. Once you start noticing these, the world feels written on. Trees become marked by holes that are homes. Riverbanks become shaped by tunnels. Fields become patterned by trails and dens. The environment becomes not only where life happens, but what life leaves behind. These external structures can be tested by selection just as bodies are. Better dams protect better. Better nests hide better. Better webs catch more. So genes can shape the world beyond the body, and that shaped world can feed back into which genes continue. This idea gently dissolves the boundary between organism and environment. The self becomes less like a sealed container and more like a center of influence, sending effects outward. In humans, the extension is vast. Homes, roads, farms, languages, tools, cities lit at night. These are not DNA, yet they arise from brains built by genes, and they reshape survival in return. Tonight, you can let this feel like a soft expansion of the story. Life does not only adapt to the world, it also edits the world, leaving behind structures that become part of the next generation's beginning. And as you rest, notice how even your own room is a small shelter built by countless hands and inherited skills, a human extended phenotype, keeping you warm, keeping you safe, keeping the night quiet enough to sleep. Sometimes the reach extends into other organisms. A parasite can alter the behavior of a host, nudging it toward water or toward danger in ways that help the parasite's own future. A chemical signal can change a body's routine. A trick can be written into instinct. In these cases, the effects of a set of genes are visible not only in one body, but in the actions of another. The world becomes a web of influences. Genes shaping bodies, bodies shaping environments, environments shaping bodies again, and the night becomes a little more spacious, as if you can feel how connected the living world truly is. When we speak of a body as one organism, it feels like a single self. But in the gene's eye view, a body is also a temporary alliance, a coalition of many replicators sharing the same vehicle. Most of the time, the alliance holds. Genes that help build a working heart, a reliable immune system, a steady metabolism, tend to help themselves too, because they ride in the same ship. So harmony is common, not because nature is sentimental, but because broken vehicles do not travel far. Yet harmony is not guaranteed. Sometimes a genetic element finds a way to be passed on more often than the usual rules would allow. It biases the lottery inside reproduction, appearing in more than its fair share of sperm or eggs. In the short term, it can spread even if it harms the body carrying it. This is a kind of cheating at the level of inheritance. It reminds us that selection is not always about what is best for the organism as a whole. It is about what replicates. A cheat can rise briefly because it copies faster, but cheating that destroys the vehicle tends not to last. If a population becomes burdened with such elements, fertility drops, bodies fail, and the whole lineage can collapse. When that happens, the cheater collapses too, because a replicator cannot travel without a host. So, over a long time, many internal cheats are restrained or eliminated. Stability returns because cooperation among genes is usually the best path to continued copying. This can sound unsettling, but it can also be strangely reassuring. Even inside a body, chaos has limits. The same patient force that shaped wings and lungs also shapes restraint, because endurance requires it. As you lie here, notice the quiet miracle that your own body is holding together. Trillions of cells, countless instructions, most of them cooperating well enough for you to breathe, to heal, to sleep. And if some small conflict flickers in the background, the larger pattern remains. A coalition held by time, steadied by what can last. Tonight, you do not need to manage any of this. You can simply let the alliance do what it was shaped to do and drift into rest. It also helps explain why the idea of one true self inside the body can be misleading. The body is coherent at the level of experience, but beneath experience, there are many levels of selection and many compromises. Most compromises are quiet. They look like ordinary health. They look like appetite arriving at the right time and fatigue arriving when you need to stop. They look like the immune system learning, slowly, how to distinguish self from intruder. So, when we speak of selfishness tonight, we are not speaking of moral failure. We are speaking of the fact that replicators can have conflicts and that life continues by finding balances that can endure. When different lineages meet, the game can become an arms race of influence. One species evolves a trick. Another evolves a defense. The first adjusts again, and the second responds, and the dance continues. A classic scene is the borrowed nest. A bird lays its egg in another bird's home, leaving the host to do the work of raising a chick that is not its own. Hosts that learn to reject unfamiliar eggs do better. Parasites that mimic the right color and pattern do better. Over time, the deception becomes more refined and the detection becomes sharper. In other relationships, the influence is chemical. A parasite inside a host can release signals that change behavior, making the host more likely to be eaten by the parasite's next carrier, or more likely to move toward the place where the parasite can continue its cycle. The host, in turn, evolves nervous systems and immune systems that resist being steered. Predators and prey participate in similar exchanges. Better camouflage meets better vision. Better speed meets better timing. Plants produce toxins, and herbivores evolve detoxification. Each side becomes part of the other's environment, and so each side helps shape the other's future. This is not a story of progress toward perfection. It is a story of constant adjustment, and it helps explain why nature is full of elaborate signals, careful disguises, and finely tuned sensitivities. It also hints at something gentle. A relationship that is too destructive often collapses. If an exploiter kills its host too quickly, it closes its own road. So even harsh interactions can drift toward balance, because balance is what allows repetition. As you listen, let the word arms race soften. Think of it as a long conversation without language. A call and a reply, a move and a countermove, a living world learning, slowly, how to share space without ending itself. And tonight, you are safe from those contests. You can feel them as distant patterns like weather on a far shore while your room stays still and warm. Sometimes the end of the dance is not defeat, but a truce. An exploiter that is less damaging can allow its host to live longer, and a longer-lived host can mean a longer road for the replicator. Over time, what began as exploitation can soften into coexistence, and sometimes into mutual benefit. What lasts is not always what dominates. Often, what lasts is what can return season after season without collapsing the stage it stands on. Tonight, you can let these balances feel like the earth adjusting to itself quietly. At this point, a common thought arrives. If groups cooperate, if a community thrives by working together, why not say that selection works for the good of the group? Why not imagine a species evolving to preserve itself like a thoughtful collective? It is a comforting picture, but it often breaks when you look closely at how copying works. A group is not copied with high fidelity the way genes are. Groups form and dissolve. Members leave, join, die, migrate. A group has fuzzy edges, and its offspring groups do not carry a clean, identical blueprint. Genes, however, are copied again and again in long lineages with enough fidelity for selection to shape them. So, when we speak about evolution's main unit, we look for what can make copies of itself reliably over time. That is why the gene's eye view places emphasis on replicators. This does not mean groups are irrelevant. A group can matter deeply as an environment. Living in a group can change survival odds, shape behavior, create new pressures and new opportunities. But the group is often better thought of as a vehicle or a setting, not the enduring unit. If a cooperative group can be invaded by one selfish individual who takes the benefits without paying the costs, the group's advantage can unravel. So stable cooperation usually needs mechanisms: kinship, reciprocity, punishment, reputation, that align individual success with the cooperative pattern. When those mechanisms exist, groups can flourish. When they do not, the cooperative arrangement can be fragile. Tonight, you don't need to decide which level matters most. You can simply feel the gentleness of the distinction. Some things in the world are precise and copyable, like the letters in a long text. Other things are more like clouds, real and influential, but harder for selection to preserve as a single repeating unit. In the quiet logic of evolution, the sharp, copyable patterns tend to be where the deepest shaping occurs. And around those patterns, life builds everything else: bodies, families, societies, cultures, all swirling and changing, all temporary, all held together by what can be passed on. This is why the gene's eye view can feel both narrow and expansive. Narrow because it focuses on small pieces of DNA. Expansive because those pieces can reach outward through behavior and environment, shaping nests and dams, shaping social life, shaping the conditions under which other genes live. It is only a lens. It does not erase the richness of lived experience. It simply offers a steady way to connect the visible world to an invisible continuity. And tonight, as you become sleepier, you can let the lens rest lightly. You don't need to keep looking through it. You only need to know it exists, quietly clarifying some patterns and then fading into the background like starlight. Even with all this clarity, one paradox remains. You feel like one person. You feel like a coherent self, moving through the day, making choices, carrying memories, holding promises. And yet, the gene's eye view suggests that what we call an individual is a temporary convergence of many effects. A body is a place where countless genetic tendencies meet and cooperate. A mind is a place where countless cultural patterns arrive and interact. So, why does the self feel so solid? Perhaps because coherence is useful. A creature that can plan and act as a unit can survive better than a creature that is endlessly fragmented. So, selection can favor brains that generate a steady narrative, a sense of me, a center from which action flows. This does not make the self an illusion. It makes the self an emergent property, like a wave that is real even though it is made of many moving particles. The wave has shape. It can travel. It can crash. And yet, it is not a separate substance from the water. In the same way, your self is real in experience, even if it is built from deeper processes. The quiet gift of this understanding is not reduction. It is room. If impulses come from ancient patterns, you can notice them without obeying them. If ideas arrive from culture, you can examine them before passing them on. You can pause. You can choose. This is a kind of freedom that no gene needs to intend. It arises because a brain capable of reflection can step back from immediate urges and consider longer horizons. You can use tools, laws, ethics, and imagination to build a life that is not only a product of replication, but a work of conscious design. Tonight, you don't need to solve the paradox of self. You can simply rest inside it. A coherent story, held in a body, held in a culture, held in a night that asks nothing of you. Let your narrative loosen. Let the wave settle. Let the water grow still. Humans can do things that run against simple genetic accounting. You can choose not to have children and still live a full, meaningful life. You can adopt and raise a child who does not share your DNA, and love can still feel complete. You can give time and money to strangers, care for animals, protect forests, build hospitals and schools for people you may never meet. You can sacrifice short-term advantage for long-term values. You can hold back a harsh word even when it would feel satisfying. These choices do not need to be explained away as hidden selfishness. They can be genuine commitments made in awareness. Understanding the forces that shaped us does not force us to follow them. It simply shows us the currents and then leaves us free in moments to swim differently. As the room grows quieter, let that freedom feel gentle. It is not a burden. It is a soft opening, a chance to live with intention and then to sleep. It helps, in the end, to keep one boundary clear. Evolution can explain where many tendencies come from. It can describe why certain patterns of behavior persist, why care for kin is common, why reciprocity appears, why jealousy and status sensitivity can feel so sharp. But evolution does not tell you what is right. It does not hand you a moral code. It does not instruct you to be selfish or generous. It simply shows what tended to leave copies in the past. Ethics is something we build. We build it from empathy, from reason, from shared experience, from the simple recognition that suffering is real. We build it through culture, through stories that teach kindness, through laws that protect, through rituals that remind us we belong to one another. And because culture spreads by imitation, the ethical world is also shaped by what we choose to repeat. A harsh meme can be passed on, and a gentle meme can be passed on. A cynical story can become common, or a hopeful one can. So the responsibility is subtle, not to control every thought, but to notice what you are feeding, to ask quietly whether an idea makes you more awake to others or more closed, to notice whether a habit makes your world softer or sharper. This is not about blame. It is about awareness. You can thank your biology for building the capacity to care, and you can thank your culture for teaching you how to extend that care beyond the tight circle of kin. And you can also choose to unlearn what harms. You can resist the memes that thrive on fear. You can refuse to treat old impulses as commands. You can decide with calm steadiness to live by values that you would want to see replicated in the world. Tonight, you don't need to make any grand resolutions. You only need to sense that you are not trapped. You are influenced, yes, but not owned. And that understanding can be enough to let the mind unclench and let sleep arrive. The gene's eye view can sometimes feel like it reduces the human heart to calculation. But if you hold it gently, it can do the opposite. It can show how ancient and sturdy the roots of care can be, how cooperation can be shaped by time, how tenderness can survive because it helped life endure. And then, beyond biology, it can show how culture can carry kindness farther than bloodlines ever could. A stranger becomes a neighbor. A distant suffering becomes something you can feel. A shared story becomes a bridge. In that sense, understanding does not remove meaning. It gives meaning a deeper foundation while leaving you free to choose your own. So, let the night soften the edges of these ideas. Nothing here needs to be memorized. It is enough that your mind touched the shape of the story and now can let it go. The way a hand releases a smooth stone back into water. Now the story can slow, the way a city slows after midnight. The street lights remain, but the urgency fades. Somewhere a train passes in the distance. Somewhere a small animal listens for footsteps and then relaxes when none arrive. Life continues its quiet copying, whether we watch it or not. Genes will keep traveling through bodies. Ideas will keep traveling through minds. Nests will be built and rebuilt. Songs will be learned, altered, and passed on again. And all of it will happen without asking you to stay awake. Tonight, you followed a thread from simple replication to complex life, from family to cooperation, from strategy to culture, and back to the quiet room around you. You felt how the living world can be shaped by what is passed on, and how the human world can be shaped by what is repeated. You sensed that selfishness in this context is not a moral label, but a description of how selection works. And you sensed something softer, too, that cooperation can be stable, that kindness can have deep roots, and that awareness can widen those roots into deliberate care. As you drift, imagine the long corridor of generations behind you. Not a line of faces, but a line of handoffs, each one quiet. A cell dividing in darkness, a message copied and wrapped in protection, carried forward. If this view makes you feel small, let that smallness be soothing. It means you do not have to hold the world together. The world has been holding itself together for a long time, through feedback and balance, through countless small corrections, through endurance. The blanket across you is a small shelter, like the nests and burrows we spoke about, made for the simple purpose of safety. The room is quiet, and your body knows what to do in quiet. It can soften the jaw, loosen the shoulders, slow the pulse, and allow the outside world to grow faint. And your mind, too, can rest from copying for a while. It can release the day's stories, the borrowed phrases, the half-finished worries, and let them drift away like smoke. Nothing needs to be solved to be allowed to sleep. Rest is not a reward. It is a return. Tonight, that is enough for you. Now, let all of it become background. Let it be like a book closed gently on a bedside table, still present, but no longer asking anything of you. Feel the weight of your body supported. Feel the air entering and leaving, steady and easy. If a stray idea returns, you do not have to follow it. You can watch it pass and return to the simple rhythm of breathing. The world slows, and so do we. Good night.